What do we genuinely think about Mexico's Formula One track? Is it good? Is it average? Or is it just plain rubbish? Well, I think this is a discussion that needs bringing up, because the Mexico City Grand Prix over the weekend wasn't exactly entertaining, was it? I think it only proves that the current layout needs changing to create better racing. But the worrying thing is, this is not just a one-off. We have had several boring races since Mexico came back to the Formula One calendar in 2015, where we have seen very little on-track action and drivers more often than not just following each other around the circuit with no opportunity to overtake. So where does the real problem lie? Does the whole of the circuit need changing, or is it just one particular section of track that needs altering in order to create more overtaking opportunities and create better racing? Well, for me, the problem lies at just one part of the circuit rather than the whole of it. For me, the first two sectors are not part of this problem and do not need altering, especially the first sector where most of the overtaking is done, because they've got the two DRS zones, one on the pit straight, which is over 800 metres long down to the first chicane, and then after you exit the first chicane down to turn 4, you've got another DRS zone, and that is another chance for drivers to overtake. As for the second sector, I think this is really good, particularly in qualifying, where it really tests the drivers. Although you often see cars just following each other around this section, it is great to watch, and it is a real good test for the drivers, particularly as they try to navigate these corners while also protecting the tyres. It's then when we get to the third sector, just after the third DRS zone down to turn 12, where the problem really lies. Turn 12 is of course a right-hander, but then leads the drivers into the stadium section, where the track then navigates between the two grandstands, which is a great vantage point for the fans watching. But this is where the root of the problem lies, and is the reason why we see very little overtaking around the circuit, but often leads to boring races. You see, the problem is that cars cannot run close to one another in the stadium section, let alone try and make an overtake there. And you often see cars run single file through there because naturally it is a very tight part of the circuit. And because the drivers are then forced to follow one another in this part of the circuit, it means that they can't run close enough to then get a good run out of the final corner that leads them onto the pit straight, where they can then use the DRS down the main straight, down the run to turn 1 to try and make an overtake. And we saw this problem during the Grand Prix, where drivers, even when they were 6-7 tenths behind coming onto the pit straight, even with the help of DRS, they were unable to get close enough to try and make a move into turn 1. But apart from the circuit itself, there are other factors at play as to why it is difficult to overtake, and that is of course the altitude, because Mexico is 2,000 metres above sea level. It is the highest Grand Prix of the season in terms of altitude levels, and this means the cars tend to overheat, and it puts extra stress on the engines. And this is why, and we saw several examples of this during the Grand Prix, where we saw drivers breaking the slipstream or the tow down a straight, moving to the other side of the circuit in the clean air just to try and cool the car. We saw how easy it was during the Grand Prix for a DRS train to build as well, where one driver would be leading a pack of cars but were unable to try and make a pass. Nico Hülkenberg's Haas in particular was a nightmare for the other drivers because it was extremely quick down the straights, and that meant that drivers such as Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly were stuck behind him, and even when they activated DRS they were still unable to get past him. Looking more in depth at the stadium section, I think one good thing you have to say about it is that it does provide us with one of the most incredible atmospheres at any Grand Prix over the season. You know, it's up there with the best, the likes of the Monzas, the Silverstones and the Spas, in terms of the partisan crowd that we get there and the atmosphere that they're able to create. Because to its advantage, it is unique. It is unlike any other section of track on any of the current circuits on the calendar. But it is crystal clear that changes are needed to this part of the circuit in particular, so we need a revised layout to try and help improve the racing, because otherwise every year we come back to Mexico we're going to have the same problem again and again. But the main problem is that if F1 does decide it wants to make modifications to the final sector, there aren't many options for it to use if it doesn't want to use the stadium section again. The only other option realistically it could use is to run the Formula E circuit, which runs around the back of the stadium section and uses the old Peraltada corner. I suppose the only other real option it could take is to try and revise the layout of the stadium section somehow, possibly making more use of the runoff areas, maybe making the track a bit wider, possibly also extending the run from turn 12, which is the right-hander and the entry to the stadium section, down to the tight left-hander of turn 13. We have seen other F1 tracks on the calendar be willing to listen to demands to make changes to the circuit in order to create better racing. For example, Abu Dhabi in 2021 made changes to their circuit, cutting out 2 chicanes in favour of more sweeping bends. We saw at this year's Spanish Grand Prix that the circuit reverted back to the old layout, cutting out the chicane that they added in 2007 in favour of the 2 right-hand corners that make up the final 2 turns on the circuit. It is a shame that we do seem to consistently get very underwhelming races when we go to Mexico, because it is now one of the top events on the calendar in terms of crowd numbers and the atmosphere. Mexico is very passionate about Formula One. It does help that we do have a Mexican driver on the grid in Sergio Perez at the moment, but I do think that Formula One is committed to keeping Mexico on the calendar in the long term and make the most of this surge in attendances and the carnival atmosphere that they bring. So while Mexico has got nothing to worry about in terms of its place on the calendar, it has got to worry about the quality of racing that the track is producing year after year, because we do tend to get boring races, and that stadium section is the cause of the problem. It is the main issue. It is simply awful. So something has got to be done, even if there aren't many options to make modifications. Something has got to be done to try and give us fans what we want: more entertainment and more on-track action. Let me know what you guys think about the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit. Do you think that the stadium section is the reason why we tend to get very boring races there? Or do you think that the blame lies with another section of track, or maybe the whole of the track? Do you think that actually Mexico has no place on the Formula One calendar anymore? Be sure to let me know in the comment section. And also, don't forget to leave a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.